She said, on camera, in front of the country, "I am so sorry, Mommy." That is where this report begins. Not with evidence, not with a forensic update, with a daughter's public grief. With Savannah Guthrie sobbing through a moment that no amount of professional composure could fully contain, expressing the fear that her own visibility, her own career, her own public life may have been the reason someone took her mother. It is a devastating thing to carry, and she said it out loud. That moment sits alongside a day that brought simultaneously some of the most significant investigative developments in weeks and some of the most troubling institutional revelations about the local law enforcement agency at the center of this case. 2 months. The FBI is actively analyzing DNA recovered from inside Nancy Guthrie's home. A trial date has been set for a person charged with writing a fake ransom note in this case. Emails have surfaced revealing troubling new details about the department conducting the local dimension of the investigation. A former FBI agent has stated a firm belief that the suspect in this case will be caught. Neighbors in the area where Nancy Guthrie lived have expressed growing unease, and the Pima County Sheriff's Department's silence on multiple fronts is now being interpreted publicly as a statement in itself. Police have also expanded the timeline of their investigation. That step, expanding the temporal window investigators are examining, signals something specific about where the investigative thinking has moved. It is not the action of a team that has narrowed its focus. It is the action of a team that believes the relevant events extend further back than initially understood. This is 2 months of one of the most watched missing persons and suspected kidnapping cases in recent American experience. And today it became more complicated, more emotionally visible, and in at least one respect more legally concrete than it has been at any prior point. Begin with the most legally concrete development of the day. A trial date has been set for an individual charged with writing a fake ransom note in the Nancy Guthrie case. This development requires careful parsing. The person facing trial for the fake ransom note is not the same as a suspect in Nancy Guthrie's kidnapping. The charge is specifically related to the creation and submission of a false ransom communication, not to the underlying crime of abduction. The distinction matters enormously in how this development is understood. Fake ransom notes in high-profile missing persons cases are unfortunately not uncommon. They emerge from a range of motivations: attention-seeking, financial opportunism, personal grievance against the family, or something more difficult to categorize. When they are submitted to investigators or media, they consume resources, distort the investigative picture, and impose additional psychological cruelty on families already under extreme stress. The fact that a trial date has been set for the fake note writer represents the justice system moving on one specific and bounded element of the broader case. It is a real legal outcome. It is not, however, the resolution that matters most. The FBI is actively analyzing DNA recovered from inside Nancy Guthrie's home. That confirmation, consistent with the timeline reported in the previous days of coverage, indicates the forensic process is continuing on the primary evidence stream. The hair DNA that was sent to Quantico, flagged as potentially critical, is being worked. The question of when that analysis produces a publicly known result remains open. The blood evidence dimension of this case received an update following the blood splatter findings that were reported in the prior period. The connection between the blood pattern analysis and the DNA evidence picture is an important one for investigators. Blood evidence can establish what happened and where it happened. DNA evidence can establish who was there. When those two forms of evidence speak to the same moment in time, they build the kind of corroborating picture that a prosecution requires. The expansion of the police timeline in the investigation is analytically significant in a way that goes beyond the procedural. When investigators broaden the window they are examining, it reflects one of two things. Either they believe the relevant events, the planning, the reconnaissance, the preparation, began earlier than the abduction itself, or they have received information through tips, forensic results, or other means that suggest activity in a prior period that bears on the current investigation. Neither possibility is public knowledge at this time, but the expansion of the timeline itself is a fact. And facts in an investigation do not emerge from nowhere. Coming up, what the emails about the Pima County Sheriff's Department reveal, and why a Pima County official has described the department's situation as troubling. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has been a recurring presence in the public record of the Nancy Guthrie investigation for reasons that have had nothing to do with investigative progress. Today, additional information about the department has deepened the concern about its conduct and its capacity. Emails have surfaced that are described in available reporting as revealing troubling new details about the department leading the local dimension of this investigation. The specific content of those emails has not been fully disclosed in the public reporting available at the time of this broadcast. But the characterization of their content as troubling and the fact that they have now entered the public record of this case adds a documentary dimension to the institutional concerns that observers have been raising for several days. A Pima County official, someone operating within the governmental structure that includes the sheriff's department, has publicly described aspects of the department's conduct or communications as troubling. That characterization from an internal perspective carries weight that outside criticism alone does not. When officials within a jurisdiction describe their own law enforcement agency's behavior in those terms, it reflects a level of concern that goes beyond public relations difficulty. The department's silence on specific questions related to the investigation has also been noted. Silence in this context is not neutral. The sheriff's department has been asked questions about its conduct, about the misleading post from the prior day, about the United Cajun Navy request, and about the nature of the changes made within the department in the period before Nancy Guthrie was taken. The absence of answers to those questions in an active kidnapping investigation where public trust is an investigative resource is itself informative. A specific piece of historical information has surfaced about the Pima County Sheriff's Department that adds context to its current situation. The department made significant internal changes in the year before Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. The nature of those changes and whether they affected the department's capacity or posture in any way relevant to this investigation is not fully detailed in available reporting. But the timing of those changes, occurring in the period immediately preceding a major crime in the department's territory, has drawn attention. Additionally, television ties between the Pima County area and the department in the pre-kidnapping period have been reported. The significance of those connections and whether they bear any relationship to how information about Nancy Guthrie's family and circumstances may have circulated has not been established. But the disclosure of those connections adds another layer to a picture of a department whose history and relationships in the period before this crime are now subjects of legitimate scrutiny. The neighbors of Nancy Guthrie have become more vocal about their unease. In the weeks since her disappearance, the community where she lived has experienced the particular strain of knowing a violent crime happened in their immediate vicinity and not knowing whether whoever is responsible has returned or will. That community anxiety is real. It affects daily life, and it reflects the incomplete resolution of a crime that has not, by any account, been solved. There is a moment in almost every long-running missing persons case when the private grief of the family becomes public in a way that the family did not choose and cannot fully control. It breaks through, it is there on a face, in a voice, in the specific words someone uses when they cannot hold back what they have been carrying. For Savannah Guthrie, that moment came today. In what is described in available reporting as a deeply emotional moment, Savannah Guthrie was seen sobbing and expressing grief over the fear that her public profile, her career, her fame may have been what made her mother a target. The specific words attributed to her in available reporting are directed at her mother. "I am so sorry, Mommy." That sentence, those specific words, carry the weight of a fear that may be the most private and specific anguish she has been living with since the day Nancy Guthrie disappeared. The theory that a kidnapper chose Nancy Guthrie specifically because of her daughter's public profile is not a new one in the coverage of this case. From the earliest days of the investigation, the prominence of Savannah Guthrie's career was understood to be a potential factor in why her mother was targeted. But there is a difference between that hypothesis existing in public analysis and the daughter of the missing woman saying out loud on camera that she fears her own life caused this. That is a burden that no public visibility can prepare someone to carry. And it is a burden that has been carried, visibly or not, for 84 days. The family, according to reporting on the current state of the Guthrie household, is leaning on one another. In the absence of resolution, in the presence of sustained uncertainty, the structure of family support is what makes it possible to continue to go to work, to face cameras, to answer questions, to hold together while the investigation runs its course. A colleague of Savannah Guthrie has publicly acknowledged her strength in a way that reflects a professional community that knows what she is going through and has chosen not to be silent about it. That kind of public recognition is not a trivial thing. It is a form of witness, of saying, we see this and we are not pretending it is not happening. The family's experience of this investigation has included not only the grief of the disappearance, but also the institutional failures that have made the investigation harder to trust. The misleading post from the sheriff's agency, the emails now in the public record, the silence that a former FBI agent says the family has every right to be frustrated by, the DNA fumble that one former agent said should make the family irked, using that precise word to describe the reasonable frustration of a family watching evidence handling fall short. The question of whether investigators have managed this case in a way that the family deserves is now a public one. The former FBI agents commenting on this investigation have not been uniformly reassuring. The one who said the family should be irked by the DNA evidence handling was not speaking casually. That kind of language, from someone with investigative experience, reflects a specific professional assessment of what should have been done differently. In almost every high-profile missing persons investigation, there comes a moment when attention begins to focus inward. Not outward toward unknown strangers, but inward toward the people closest to the person who disappeared. That moment has arrived in the Nancy Guthrie case, and two names in particular have become central to that discussion. Annie Guthrie and Tommaso Cioni are individuals connected to the Guthrie family who have, according to available reporting, come back into focus as part of the investigative and public conversation around this case. The specific reasons for that renewed attention have not been fully explained in official statements. But the pattern of coverage and analytical commentary makes clear that investigators and observers have not set them aside. It is important to state clearly what is known and what is not. Neither Annie Guthrie nor Tommaso Cioni has been publicly charged in connection with Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Law enforcement has not officially named either individual as a suspect in public statements available at the time of this reporting. What exists is a pattern of scrutiny, a pattern of public analytical attention, and a series of reports that have repeatedly returned to these two individuals as figures of interest in the broader investigation. Former federal agents commenting publicly on the case have addressed the question of Tommaso Cioni and Annie Guthrie directly. The analysis offered focuses on their potential knowledge of circumstances surrounding the disappearance and on behavioral and circumstantial observations that investigators and analysts have flagged. One line of expert commentary has focused specifically on the question of what individuals close to a victim might know, even if they were not directly involved in the crime itself. In parallel, Annie Guthrie and Tommaso Cioni have themselves issued public statements. According to reporting on those communications, they have addressed their situation and the scrutiny they are undue, and yet the same investigative community has also expressed consistently the belief that this case is solvable, that the suspect has made errors, that those errors leave traces, and that the people working this case have the tools and the will to find them. The characterization of those statements as a bold warning reflects the directness with which they have chosen to engage with the public conversation around their involvement or alleged non-involvement in the case. 2 months is a number, but it is not only a number. In the language of kidnapping investigations, 84 days is the kind of duration that changes the nature of the case, not the priority, not the commitment, but the practical conditions under which evidence exists. Witnesses remember, and leads remain alive. Investigators working this case understand that. The expansion of the timeline they are examining reflects exactly that understanding. They are reaching further back because the answers to the questions the current evidence is raising may live in events that preceded the abduction by more than investigators initially assumed. The fake ransom note trial date is a concrete legal milestone. Someone will face justice for deliberately introducing false information into a kidnapping investigation. That is meaningful. It is also bounded. The larger justice that the Guthrie family is waiting for has not yet arrived at the courthouse steps. The DNA analysis at Quantico continues on the primary evidence stream. The blood evidence reconstruction is complete. The elimination matrix built from home help DNA swabs is in place. Whatever the hair evidence produced at Quantico is now being evaluated against that matrix. The forensic clock is ticking toward a result. The Pima County Sheriff's Department continues to be a source of concern that the investigation cannot fully insulate itself from. The emails, the statements described as troubling by internal officials, the silence on the volunteer search request, the pre-kidnapping changes within the department, the pre-existing television ties. All of these elements are now in the public record and part of how this investigation is understood. A former FBI agent has said the suspect will be caught. That belief, stated firmly and publicly, comes from a professional reading of the evidence trail and the mistakes embedded in it. Whoever took Nancy Guthrie made errors. The question is whether the investigation has yet reached the point where those errors are visible in a form that can be acted on. Savannah Guthrie said she was sorry. She said it to her mother. She said it because she carries the fear that her public life made her mother a target. That fear, whether or not it is accurate in the way she imagines it, is real. It is what 84 days of this does to a person. The neighbors are uneasy. The family is leaning on each other. The investigators are working. The forensic clock is moving. And somewhere in a laboratory in Virginia, or in a gas station camera image, or in the expansion of a timeline that now reaches further back than it once did, the answer to this case may already exist. It has not yet been announced. It has not yet been confirmed. The question of where Nancy Guthrie is on day 84 is the same question it has been on every day before it. Still open, still urgent, still the only question that counts at the end. The question of what it means to expand a timeline in an investigation like this one is not answered by the expansion alone. It is answered by what the expansion reveals. Investigators do not extend their analytical window without a reason. In some cases, the reason is a tip. In others, it is a forensic result that points to a prior period. In others still, it is documentary evidence, like the emails now in the public record, that creates questions about what was happening in the area and within the relevant institutions before the crime itself occurred. The pre-kidnapping changes made within the Pima County Sheriff's Department are a specific piece of information that has gained new significance in the context of the timeline expansion. If investigators are now looking at events in the year before Nancy Guthrie was taken, and if that year includes significant institutional changes within the local law enforcement agency that would have been responsible for her area, the overlap is worth examining. Not as an accusation, as an investigative question that the available record now prompts. The television ties in the Pima County area in that same pre-kidnapping period fit within the same expanded analytical frame. What information about Nancy Guthrie, her family, and her circumstances was circulating in the area before she was taken, through what channels, accessible to whom? These are questions that an expanded timeline investigation can begin to answer in ways that an investigation limited to the post-abduction period cannot. A former FBI agent's firm belief that the suspect will be caught because of their mistakes gains additional analytical weight in the context of an expanded timeline. If the mistakes extend further back than the day of the crime, the investigative record of those mistakes is correspondingly larger, and a larger record of errors is a larger target for investigators to build a case from. The neighbors' growing unease reflects the community's awareness of that extended timeline in a different way. They have been living with the knowledge of a violent crime for 2 months. Now, the suggestion that the relevant events may extend even further back than those 2 months adds a layer of retrospective unease to what was already a difficult community experience. The question of what resolution looks like in this case has become more complex as the investigation has extended. In the earliest days, resolution meant finding Nancy Guthrie alive and arresting the people responsible. That remains the hope for outcome. But the passage of 2 months, the ransom note claiming her death that has not been confirmed or denied, and the sustained absence of any public progress toward that outcome have introduced a more complicated set of possible resolutions into the calculus. Whatever form the resolution ultimately takes, it will be built on the investigative work that is happening now, the DNA analysis at Quantico, the expanded timeline examination, the documentary evidence about the local institution, the gas station footage, the behavioral profile refined over months of communication analysis. All of those elements are the building blocks of whatever comes next. A former FBI agent's firm public statement that the suspect will be caught is the professional assessment of someone who has seen what happens when investigative work of this kind reaches its endpoint. The endpoint is not always clean. It is not always what the family hoped for, but it is in the professional judgment of people who have spent careers in this space where the evidence and the resources and the sustained federal commitment of an investigation like this one eventually lead. 2 months is not the end point. It is a point in the middle, a point at which the picture is more complete than it was, the investigative posture is more targeted than it was, and the forensic, documentary, visual, and analytical work being done every day is closer to producing a result than it was on day one. That progress has cost the Guthrie family 2 months of sustained uncertainty. What it has produced in the investigative record, if not yet in the public record, may be the foundation of the resolution that the family, the investigators, and the country watching this case are still waiting for.